with my mother's persistence, and asked if he possibly could find a job for me. I was surprised how quickly I got a letter back saying, absolutely, come on down to Moline, I'll find a job for you. And I did, 16 years of age, barely 16. Well, I got myself a one-room place to live up the hill from the factory, and I started working in the shipping department. Now, he thought that'd be a great place for me to start, since I would learn about the equipment they had and where they went. I'd been there a little over a week, closing in on 2 weeks, and we were loading the beams for sulky piles. You know what a sulky pile was? And those beams were about 270 pounds. I didn't weigh very much at that time. I managed to do a little better later. But at that time, I couldn't lift them. I couldn't get them in the wagon. And so I let the big boys do that, and I went over and sat down in one of the wagons and watched them. Well, about that time, Henry Conrad, the foreman, walked into the room, saw me sitting there. He said, well, you're pretty useless. Take a hike, you're done. I said, fine. I jumped off the wagon, and I started walking up the hill. And then, as sometimes happens with a 16-year-old mind, it dawned on me, wait a minute, I don't have a job. That means I don't have any money coming, and I can't pay for this room. Not to mention food. And I said, what am I going to do? I couldn't go home with my tail between my legs. A week and a half or 2 weeks, fired from the company. The next day I got up, I went down and started working like nothing had ever happened. Well, after a couple hours, here came Henry walking in again. He stopped, he looked at me, he says, well, I'll be damned. He says, I guess if you're that stubborn, you might as well stay on. So I was hired back the next day. I'll tell you, I got out of that shipping department as fast as I could and got into the office. I became the assistant bookkeeper. The title was a lot more prestigious than the job. What I did was get the books out of the vault in the morning, dust them off, and put them away at night, and whatever other errands that the bookkeeper wanted me to do. Now, at that time, there was only one office. Everybody worked in the same office. I didn't know a debit from a credit. But I watched what he did, and I learned. And I also started helping the other people in the office. The purchasing manager, the buyer, clerk. And I would stay and help them afterward. Remember, I'm only 16, 17. I didn't have much of a social life at that time. I was lucky to pay the bills, so I'd stay till 10 o'clock at night sometimes, helping out. But I learned the process. Well, it so happened, the purchasing clerk left, and I was given the job. And soon thereafter, I was also given the buyer's clerk job. And 18 years of age. That's a lot of responsibility for an 18-year-old. But I knew how to do it, because I'd watched and I'd observed and I learned. Well, I decided after about 3 years I wanted to finish my law, because I was really interested in that. And Deere thought it would be a good idea to get some legal background to help out with their legal affairs. So I went to the University of Iowa for 1 year. Then I transferred to Harvard and finished my law degree at Harvard. I went back to Dixon up near Polo and worked for this lawyer for a while until I passed the bar. And then Charles Deere told me to get back into Moline, set up a practice, and they would use me as their lawyer. Too good of an opportunity to pass up, having a ready-made client that big. So I moved back. Probably the two biggest things I did for Deere as a lawyer, one was the case of McCleary versus Deere & Company. Now McCleary was running an emery wheel, and the emery wheel split apart and sprayed on him and broke 2 of his ribs. So he sued the company. Well, the question was, who was at fault? The company with the emery wheel or the operator? Well, we went to trial, and I won the case for Deere. But following that, I told Charles, I said, you know what would be a smart thing to do? I says, forget about who's at fault in these cases, but if anybody gets injured on the job, we will pay all their expenses, and we'll pay them a compensation. Remember the day Charles stood there, he looked at me, didn't say a word for a minute, finally said, "That's the damnedest fool idea I ever heard of," and walked out the door. The next morning, I got a call. "Get over here to my office." Oh, I went over to his office. He said, "Well, it's now in effect what you suggested. And boy, it better work." You know, from 1901 to 1911, when that was in operation, there was not one single suit filed against Deere because we took care of those who got injured. In 1911, the state of Illinois passed a compensation law for workers' compensation. And the lawyer, one of the senators at the time, said, if it had not been for Peek's proposal for the use for Deere and Company, it would never have passed the Congress in Illinois. So I felt pretty good about that. Also, from about 1902 on, I was put in charge of reorganizing Deere by buying up all of our subsidiaries and all of our suppliers to put them under one umbrella. Well, in 1907, Charles Deere died. I was trustee of the estate, and so it was suggested at that time to give up my law practice and move to work for John Deere full time. So I was hired as treasurer and legal counsel. And my main job was to continue working on this merger and putting together this company, which happened in 1910. It was all put together. And I was very proud of that. Following that, I was promoted to vice president and legal counsel. Well, I held that job until 1942. What happened in 1942? Well, there was a war on. Charlie Wyman was president at that time, and he went off to war and asked me to take over as president. Well, I was president of Deere then for 2 years. Well, he was gone. Happy to give it back to him when he returned. But I was then made chairman of the board of directors, a position I held for the rest of my life. Until 5 years before that when I retired, but they wouldn't let me leave the board. I got to retire from chairman. So if anybody here thinks they can retire when they want to, they can if they tell them they're going to stay. The reason I didn't like that particularly because I had an obsession with golf. I was a member of the Arsenal Golf Club. Some of you old people here may remember the Arsenal Golf Club, maybe even seen me playing over there.
I caddied for you, sir.
You were just a little whip of a thing.
Yeah, believe it.
At any rate, I also had golf holes in my backyard, right across from the Deere Wyman house, and there I had several golf holes put out there. But my main golf course that I loved was the Augusta National Golf Course. Along with Bobby Jones, I was one of the founders. The first 2 cottages that were built on the greens in Augusta, where the Masters tournament is played, was Bobby Jones and myself. Soon, we let the military come in because a man by the name of General Dwight D. Eisenhower built one right next to me. And we played a lot of golf with those 2. Gene Sarrazin was another one who helped with the development of that course that I was good friends with and played a lot. I was on many committees of that. I was on the Rules Committee for a number of years. I was chairman of the board there for some years. At my death, a plaque was written and placed in the clubhouse that still exists. It says, Burton F. Peek hit more golf balls on this course in his lifetime than any other human. Well, that's one I'm proud of. Oh yeah. How did I become a fugitive from the law? Well, as a man by a CI and I, a friend of mine from Moline, who went to Nebraska to do a little hunting. Now, we went to Nebraska and I guess we forgot a few things like getting permission and licenses and things like that. We just went out there to hunt. The word got out. And all of a sudden game wardens were looking for us. Word got to us that we were wanted men. We said, we better get out of here. We didn't want to have a criminal record. We got in our car and headed out. Well, then they found blockades. They were looking for us. So we'd sneak down back roads and backtrack. And then they got the sheriff and the deputies after us. And pretty soon the whole state military is looking for us. We went a ways right through that state trying to get there. You can't imagine the thrill that I had when I crossed over to Council Bluffs, Iowa, and saw cornfields. And we got out of their jurisdiction. And I still have a clean record. Never having done wrong. If you escape, you can do that. Well, I was married twice. My first wife had 3 children. She died a couple of weeks after our 3rd child was born. That child died by the age of 3. A few years later, I married another woman. She was from Columbus, Mississippi. And we also had 3 children. I'd given up with any hope that we were going to have a boy, so I named my 6th daughter Burton Peek Jr. Unfortunately, she died at the age of 3 as well.
Wow.
My wife and I liked entertaining, and I loved entertaining, and I got a reputation in the Quad Cities and at Augustus as making the best martini that anybody had ever had. And they asked me, "What do you put in there?" I said, "It's a secret." They said, "Well, give us your secret." I said, "Well, now, how long would it be a secret if I told you?" And I wouldn't tell them. So I need to know, is there any martini aficionados here? Anybody who is a good martini drinker? Knows about these? No, see, nobody will admit it, will they? Nobody will admit it. Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to make one of my martinis right now. And I'm somebody out there who's going to get that and test it and tell me whether they think it's the best martini they've had in the Quad Cities. I will tell you some of the things that might be in this. This is going to be, obviously, a gin martini. Whoever thought vodka made martini, I don't know. Now, one of the secrets, of course, is to get a good British gin. All right? That's the key one, number 1. Secondly, you want to get a good French vermouth or a good dry Italian vermouth. All right. Then we're going to mix this. I'm trying to hide it back here because I don't want you to see my secret ingredients. I know how some people are. You'll pass it on and I won't get secret anymore. All right.
Yeah, the scotch makes a martini drinkable.
Now we're getting there. So we're going to put about 3 parts of gin in here. And 1 part of the good dry vermouth. Now, who's the brave person who's going to be the tester of this? You are. Is there a doctor in the house? You are supposed to try that, sir.
Where's the lemon?
No, this is my martini.
Oh.
Take several sips because he's not sure it's any good.
Eat a dipper. Be sure of yourself.
You absolutely have to be sure. Well, my name is Burton Peek. I was born in 1872 in Lowell, Illinois. I died at the age of 88 in Moline in 1960. And if you want to know that secret recipe, if you talk to me real nice, I might tell you what it is sometime.